Please, everyone, take your seats.
Kien hemm erba' minn nies tajjeb illum il-bejt.
Għaddu ma moċi.
Kien hemm il-Prim Ministru xi 11. Balla skejjel. Ajjima dan nara.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Europe Day discussion in the loop with the group. We are bringing students and policymakers together for this discussion 1 year after the elections almost. First of all, thank you for joining us. We have Dr. Alex Agius Saliba and Dr. Peter Agius, members of the Socialists and Democrats and European People's Party respectively. Let's start by getting to know what each of you has been working on for this past year. Can you highlight one piece of legislation or initiative that you've been most proud of working so far?
So first of all, thanks for organizing this event on Europe's Day. So mainly, I am more focused in the European Parliament when it comes to coordinating the digital initiatives on behalf of the Socialist and Democrats group. That is my day-to-day work in Parliament, from overseeing the implementation of the Digital Services Act, the Digital Markets Act, the Artificial Intelligence Act. Basically, this is day-to-day work that is mainly dealing with coordination of all those MEPs sitting in the Socialist and Democrats group, which is the second largest group in Parliament, dealing with digital dossiers. But when it comes to legislation, during the past months, I have been working on the Package Travel Directive as a rapporteur, as the Parliament's negotiator. Right now, we are at an advanced stage when it comes to negotiations internally with different political groups. Basically, it's a piece of legislation where we are trying to find the right balance between enhancing consumer protection for consumers who are using not only online, but also physical services when it comes to booking their holidays and having more than one service combined. And basically what we want to achieve is what were our biggest difficulties during the pandemic. When the pandemic hit us, we ended up with a lot of uncertainty when it comes to vouchers, when it comes to full refunds. So when you have an emergency and you have booked, prepaid your holiday, you need certainty that if a force majeure happens, it's really important for you to have the legal safeguards to be covered in such situations. But also, on the other hand, not to put extra burdens on this very important sector, which is also very important for us, since we are heavily reliant also when it comes to our economy on the tourism industry. It's really important not to overburden the industry, because ultimately if you overburden the industry, there will also be a shift in price for consumers. So it's really a job to try to find the right balance between different interests. But right now I am also working on coordinating within the LIBA committee the strategy for disability 2024-2029, and also an upcoming very important piece of legislation, which is the next step after the Artificial Intelligence Act, the AI Act at the workplace. So protecting workers from new AI realities, because for us, workers are human beings, they have fundamental rights and they are not robots.
Thank you.
Thanks for organizing. It's always a pleasure to be back on campus. When it comes to our work in this almost now a year since election, my focus has been, rather than seeing the evolution of the EU agenda and contributing to that, I'm taking more of an approach of seeing what were our pledges during the election, what are our national needs, how we need to adapt the EU rules to Malta's specific circumstances, and I'm striving to give an input at every possible occasion to see that we adapt Europe to Malta. Because Malta has very specific needs. We have our own strengths, we have our own weaknesses, we have our own peculiarities, and I'm seeing that these are put on the table of the European Union policy making. To give a few examples, I have intervened, for instance, in the EPP, European People's Party, to sensibilize EPP that there are neutral member states like Malta, and that when we speak about defense and assisting Ukraine, which we want to assist Ukraine, but we need to do it in a sensible way, respecting the neutrality policy of certain member states. This I have done inside the EPP, so that people know, that we are part of this and they need to respect us as well. I have intervened in a number of dossiers, always to center the approach of the institutions around our specific needs. For instance, in the Agriculture Committee, where I am sitting as member, there was this discussion about assistance, about natural disasters, and there I put on the table, listen, in Malta, we have a huge problem with drought. You know that we had, in 2023, less rainfall than a desert. A desert is 250 millimeters. In Malta, we had 249. So European Union policy should know that when we're speaking about natural disasters, we need to speak about drought in the Mediterranean, especially in Malta. I have intervened in the Internal Market Committee about public procurement, where I have submitted amendments that we should make sure that when public authorities issue public contracts, they are transparent and allow an open competition. I see a lot of students here who might take up an entrepreneurial activity in the future. I think it is in our interest to have transparency in public procurement, that when government issues tenders or when government needs to do work, it sees what the market is offering in a transparent way. I have intervened also on some of the files, like package travel, which Alex is leading in the Internal Market Committee. And I have also, I'm very proud of my role also in the Petitions Committee, where I'm trying to open up this committee to the participation of the public. For instance, next week, Alex and myself, because Alex is sitting in the committee as well, will be listening to the concerns of people with the celiac condition, people who are intolerant to gluten. And now in that committee, for instance, I'm ensuring that there is a Maltese voice, getting some people from Malta to speak about the celiac condition also in the European Parliament. So my approach is to try to find the Malta element in all the policies. And this, of course, it's a lot of work, but I'm very motivated, I'm very excited, not only with the little achievements we have with this year, but in what we can do in the coming years.
Thank you very much for that opening question. Now we're going to move on to European values. So the EU is centered around these European values. What do these mean to the Maltese context, in your opinion? And are there any conflicts between these values and local interests?
At European Parliament level, there are always conflicts. Internal conflicts, as in there you are representing many different interests. So you are sitting in a political group. We are coming from a plenary this week. You have different voting intentions for each and every political group, but then there are, and for me that is always a priority, there are national interests which go over and above. the voting intentions and voting indications or priorities of our political families. Although I am Vice President of the Socialist and Democrats group, but still, when it comes to national priorities, they are always paramount to each and every other priority. For me, that has always been the way that I have worked during the past six years as a member of the European Parliament. But yes, I think that the basic values enshrined under Article 5 of the treaty are the most fundamental values which I believe are also relevant and important for us. So it's really important for us to continue to promote these values, but at the same time, it's also very important to safeguard our interests within the institutions and also within those who try to use those values to undermine national interests. So it's really important for us, and this week, case in point, we had a very important discussion also with Parliament. We had different opinions on the citizenship by investment, but there again, it's really important to make a difference between what is really important for Malta, and then we had a situation where other member states, such as Austria, had an identical program. There are 6 other member states, including Portugal, who upgraded the residence scheme after the court pronounced itself on the citizenship scheme of Malta. There is Italy, there is Spain, there is Greece, there is Crete. All of these member states have residency programs, not citizenship, but residency. Austria has a citizenship program. So it's really important for us to safeguard also at European level. Peter also mentioned a number of points when it comes to other sectors. During the past 6 years, I have also worked hard to safeguard fishermen. When we had 6 years ago the case dealing with the Lampuki fishermen who were being targeted by Tunisian fishermen. A number of other interests, such as the interest of consumers. Yesterday, I participated in a debate where, again, I continue to push forward with the Commission. It was a debate dealing with the internal market and the future of the internal market. I made it a point, and here I think that we agree on the point of pharmaceuticals, for example, the importance of having pharmaceuticals part of the internal market. The internal market is the jewel in the crown of the European Union. That is the best example where Europe can work to give better quality of life to our citizens. So it's really important, and this is a missing piece in the puzzle, I believe, that pharmaceuticals should also be part and parcel of the internal market, because ultimately the smallest member states end up faring worse when it comes to the free movement of pharmaceuticals, and ending up in a situation of higher prices and less availability on the market. So it's really important. The basic rights of the Union enshrined under Article 5, the basic values, are important, but it's really important to use those values for the benefit and not against the interest of our member states.
Thank you very much, Dr.
First, I think I would like to debunk a myth, the way I see it, We tend to speak a lot about the Europe of values. We speak a lot about it. But when you examine the European project closely and when you are in it, I have been a negotiator in the Council, I have been working for Parliament, and now I am MEP. When you are in it, you realize that maybe Europe has, when you speak about the European Union and its institutions, maybe it has one single overriding value which is fundamental for all of us, and that is that we listen to each other. So we are a grouping of nations with their own needs their own policies, with their own reservations. But what really brings us together is our will to listen to each other and to accommodate each other as far as possible. So I know that I'm sitting with French, Italians, Polish, Germans, Czechs, Spaniards, and I know that they will be available for me to explain what I need for Malta. And that's beautiful. They are available. And Alex will certainly attest to this also in his work in the Socialists and Democrats and in all the European Parliament. But then, of course, Europe is essentially a grouping of interests. So the trick here is to negotiate using the value of we can listen to each other, we can try to compromise. But at the same time, you need to be very much aware that every MEP, every member state is responding to a set of national interests. And in a way, this is the beauty of Europe. This is the beauty of Europe, you know. So we can talk straight in many areas. But at the same time, I know that I can deliver results to the Maltese people if we are smart enough to push a sound argument for the sake of our economy, for the sake of our students, for the sake of our workers. And this is essentially what we are meant to do in the European Parliament. Then there is another value which I think can unite us as Maltese, and certainly as Maltese MEPs, is that in many areas, okay, we can find more common ground. So when we speak about, Alex mentioned, for instance, the passports question, I can agree on a number of points that Alex himself made, for instance, in plenary yesterday, or the day before. I cannot share the general trust. There is common ground. I do agree, for instance, that citizenship is and should always remain a question of national competence. So we might have divergences, and we can have serious differences when it comes to governance, for instance, and a number of other areas. But we should strive to find common ground, because finally we achieve results. Also by making sure that the whole of Europe is sensibilized. So what I can do in the European Parliament is not enough unless it is reflected also in the Council of Ministers, where our ministers will then represent Malta. So, and this is I want to encourage in Malta. I think we should have more national debate based on policy and what is our national interest and our common ground.
Thank you. Moving on to the youth. How are you working to ensure that EU policies reflect the concerns of young people, especially as many young people are considering moving abroad to other EU countries? So how are you working to ensure that EU policy reflects nationally to keep the youth in Malta?
So I think that one of the priorities and one of the main challenges that Europe is facing right now is to create a more competitive environment. The brain drain is not only an issue that is being faced by Malta, but we are also facing a brain drain as a continent. And ultimately, when it comes to being competitive, being at edge with other continents, here I can focus on digital because that is my main area of expertise. When you look at numbers, for example, the talent is there. We have the best app developers in Europe. If you see the percentage of app developers, we are leading the way. But there is no scale up. And that is one of the biggest challenges that we are facing and that we must tackle as soon as possible. The issue of investing, of creating and directing funding directly, and this is one of the main priorities that I am working upon and leading as Vice President responsible for digital in the Socialist Group, the creation of a European Sovereignty Fund, funded by own resources, which can ultimately help out our innovators, our youths who want to take a career path and scale up, not only to study and go abroad and leave the continent, but to stay in Europe and create an alternative. We had a lot of discussions, for example, complaining about X, how democratic the platform is, if it is respecting our values, but do we have an alternative? Do we have a European platform based on our values, which can replace and can be an alternative for Meta, for these US big tech giants? No. Why? Because there's no scale up in Europe. When it comes to cloud computing, so all the data of our governments, all the data, our personal data, supposedly in accordance with the General Data Protection Regulation, where is it being stored? 80% of European cloud, 80% of our reliance when it comes to cloud infrastructure is outside of our continent. When it comes to online advertising, 85% of all online advertising, which is the business model of the platforms which have become public utilities of our time, is concentrated in the hands of 3 US big tech giants. So when you are speaking about the importance of retaining the talent, because ultimately that is the question, it is part of the beauty also of Europe that you have Maltese youths who go study abroad, have experiences abroad. I have nothing against that. But what I believe is the biggest challenge that we are facing is the European brain drain, is the issue of being over-reliant on other continents when it comes to the most basic things, when it comes to microchips. We had the Chips Act, now we are going for the second phase of the Chips Act. We saw last week a very good investment also from a company which is established in Malta in the semiconductor industry, but we need more resilience. Resilience not only in defense, in military. We need resilience when it comes to technologies. We need resilience when it comes to innovation. We need resilience when it comes to being more competitive as a continent. That is how you retain talent. That is how you retain youths in the European continent and attract youths from other continents.
Thank you.
Well, I think for the sake of Europe itself, for the sake of the European project itself and the beauty of the European Union, we should make sure that the European agenda is a youth agenda. I'm not seeing enough of this. You know, every plenary that I attend in Strasbourg, we have like 30 debates. And I think we cover like 40% of those debates are foreign affairs, Ukraine, Venezuela, what have you. They are all important. Then you have a lot of debates on our economy. We don't have enough discussion on how to involve the youths and respond to their needs in Europe. How am I trying to contribute to a better representation of youth interests in Europe? What I'm trying to do is to participate more and more, as much as I can, in debates and bringing in a youth dimension. One case in point is discussing mental health and protections to our behavior online. So I participated a few times in plenary, for instance, on discussions on how social media is impacting our behavior and our mental health. When I do this, I get very good feedback from the youth population, including from Maltese. I am making sure, for instance, that in Petitions Committee, we give a voice to the younger generations to come forward with ideas and concerns when it comes to social media and mental health. We should do also more to open up opportunities for people like you and all the student population at university, at MCAS, all the Maltese youth, opportunities in Europe itself. Because let's face it, we are an island. We are a little blotch in the middle of the map, in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. We must open up our mentality, our experiences, for all our young people to have an experience abroad. I think this should be an engagement of all the political entities here in Malta, of the political parties, of all of us. We need to open up opportunities for youth in Europe. It should be basically a principle in our constitution. And there are many opportunities. There is Euroscola when you're 17. Then there is Erasmus when you're a bit older. Then there is Discover EU in the meanwhile, where you can have an opportunity abroad paid by the European Union. Then you have all the possibilities of traineeships. We should be vociferous about spreading the word of the possibilities of young people like you participating in Europe. And we must do another thing. This is important. We must go beyond our allocations as a nation of 400,000 people. Let's face it. Because when the European Commission is distributing the units for how many people go on Erasmus, how many people go on Discover EU, how many people get to do Solidarity Corps. You know Solidarity Corps? It's for entities like Jeff. Jeff can go to Rome or to Madrid and participate with Jeff Europe or with Jeff Spain. You know, this is Solidarity Corps. There is funding for this. Okay? But what's happening? Our funding depends on our size. But I have an argument to make here. We are an island. We should have more opportunities for youth, much bigger than our size as the smallest nation in the European Union. So this is the vocation of my mandate, and this is what I will be working on in the coming years as well. And I'm sure that there will be participation, because whenever we open up opportunities, the Maltese participate very intensively.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Now let's move on to the future of the European Union. Before the elections, we saw a growing trend of Euroscepticism. Do you think it resulted to being as severe as we thought it would be in the European Parliament when negotiating policies, maybe?
If you want me to be honest, I think it's much worse than we preempted. It's not an easy formation in the European Parliament right now. Obviously, the numbers are what they are, and the far right, if you join Patriot, CSN, and on many occasions CCR, they have a big majority. So the mainstream political groups, the pro-European political groups, and DPP and SND, should and must continue always to be that pro-European force in Parliament, which is ultimately calling for more ambition when it comes to achieving our priorities, when it comes to building up on what we have achieved during the past mandate. It's really important to have this cross-party support and collaboration when it comes to our priorities, because ultimately, I am seeing a shift in this legislature when compared to the previous legislature. The far right during the previous legislature were very vocal on social media, but dormant when it comes to pushing forward amendments and diluting the text and being active in committees. In this legislature, they are taking a more active role with amendments in plenary and committees, trying to take up files and pushing forward the agenda of going back a step backwards and trying to ultimately challenge the European values and our ambition. In my areas, I am seeing it and I am noticing this element, which is a very strong element. So it's really important for us.
My experience so far, because I've been an MEP now not even a year, but my experience so far is that the the middle ground, you know, the moderation and the agreement, therefore, between the big political movements, the EPP, the biggest political movement in Europe, right? The People's Party, the Socialists, the Liberals. When these political forces find common ground, and invariably, in many cases, they do, that is the driving force of Europe. And so far, we're managing to do it in many areas. Having said that, I hate labels a bit, you know. So I meet a lot of colleagues who sit with the patriots, who sit with the far right, far left, and you can't really say that these colleagues are, you know, have no ideas for Europe or no ideas which make sense. I mean, you can't just throw away a person because he sits on the far end of the political spectrum, because everyone might have a good idea on which you can work together. And I must say that in some things that Europe has done in the past, I find myself also a little bit skeptical, to be honest. So when I look at the Green Deal, which does not include a specific provision for islands, and which it imposes on us taxation on flights, for instance, which we have to carry disproportionately, simply because we are 2,000 kilometers away from the continent. So a tax on flights hits us much worse than it would hit flights in mainland Europe. When I see taxation on ship transport, okay, how it hits the operations of our free port, I'm kind of skeptical myself. So let's dialogue with everyone, but again, the trick is to find yourselves, to put yourself and push yourself in the middle ground. And there is no way I can sell something to my European counterparts if I just say, listen, I'm from Malta, you know, I want this because I've been elected. No. Unless you find an argument and you compromise and you sit down and you negotiate your idea and you find a way how to make your idea European, how to make your idea universally relevant and interesting and acceptable, nothing will fly. And this is the beauty on the one hand, and also the severity of the European project. And essentially, it translates into one thing. You need to work hard to push through anything you want through the European machinery. And this is something that maybe, thankfully, maybe, the skeptics, it seems that sometimes they think that by, you know, stamping their feet, they will get things through. They don't. Sometimes they do, but when they are intelligent enough to get some of others on board. And then what does this mean for Malta? I mean, for Malta it means that we need to be stronger in the mainstream political movements, but at the same time always keep an eye on what's happening elsewhere. Because if you see all around us, I mean, there are elections in Romania happening soon, where we are expecting possibly a far-right candidate to take the presidency in Romania. We saw what happened in France, you know, we saw what happened in Germany. So at the same time, you know, we need to understand this reality. And last time I was listening to Tony Blair saying that we're living through an era where people are looking for strongmen. People are looking for politicians who at least give the impression that they will deliver the day after. Like Trump, no? Why are people fascinated by Trump? Because he gives the feeling that, you know, he thinks about it and he does it the day after. And when you see how the European Union works, that some laws take like 4 years at best to start applying Yeah, we have this challenge, but we need to understand this reality, and we need to either step up our communication with citizens. Listen, these things, I'm promising you this, but these things take time, or these things take a process, you know. We should engage with this reality. So there's no way we can ignore it and prevail at the same time.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to a question by the floor of participants. Given the recent European Citizens Initiative, which reached the EU-wide threshold, including in Malta, calling for EU funds to support women in countries where abortion is banned to access it abroad, what do you think is the future on this, and where would you stand in light of this proposal in the European Parliament?
So let's start from this point. Although I appreciate and respect all those 4,000 and a little bit more of Maltese who signed the petition, this was not a public referendum. So there were other initiatives being undertaken which reached the quota, and the quota is reached by having a particular number of citizens signing from a minimum number of member states. I remember, for example, the End the Cage initiative. It was signed, it reached the quota, it came in front of the Petty Committee, but ultimately we fought it off. Why? Because it was going to give and hit hard smaller member states, especially Malta, when it comes to the agricultural sector, when it comes to sizes of cages for which are totally doesn't make sense for the realities of a small member state, of a small island like Malta. So, although I appreciate and I respect the fact that there were those who wanted to sign this citizens initiative, and here I go a little bit back again on the different values that we are representing. So I am coming from the SND group, who is one of the most vocal, if not the most vocal group when it comes to being pro-choice and pro-abortion. I have different values when it comes to the protection of life, and I vote constantly for the past 6 years differently. I'm still respected in the group. They know that we have divergences and we have to respect these differences that we have, and I will maintain my position as legislator. I am still not convinced, and for me this is member state competence. We should decide when it comes to legislating or not when it comes to abortion. I have my opinion, but ultimately the most important point for me is that we should discuss. I am never against discussing, but this should and must continue to be member state competence, and 4,000 or a little bit more signatures won't change this point.
Well, first of all, as a Christian Democrat, I am pro-life, okay? But when it comes to the citizens initiative, I think the vector through which I approach the question is a question more of a competence and procedure. So if we're asking the European Union to fund something, this something has to be legal in all the member states. And abortion so far is not legal in Malta, right? So I am pro-life, but above all I'm pro-discussion. So what we should do is to have the discussion needs to be done in Malta, not in Europe, when it comes to abortion in Malta, because it is a national competence. The treaties are clear. Malta has also negotiated a protocol on this, a clear declaration saying that it is a national competence and it will always remain a national competence. So why I appreciate the Citizens Initiative, and we will give it due attention in the Petitions Committee in the European Parliament. But the fact remains that legally, the European Union does not have the power to act in this area. I'm not saying we shouldn't be discussing this and considering then, let's see what every one of us thinks about it in Malta, okay? I have declared myself to be pro-life, but I am, above everything, pro-discussion. But the discussion needs to be done locally, not in the European Parliament. It's of no use speaking about abortion in Malta in the European Parliament, simply because it would be always the Maltese government to decide on these questions, and the Maltese government needs an endorsement from the Maltese people. So, the discussion should be done in Malta, okay? Now, when it comes to the citizenship initiative in general, this instrument is very interesting to cultivate debate, to cultivate discussion, but of course is limited in the frustrations that we also have to face as MEPs, as citizens, that Europe has assigned a number of areas, a number of competences to the member states. They belong to the member states, like for instance planning, right? If you want to build in Malta, whether it's ODZ or not, or UCA or not, that's something belonging to the local competence, the national competence. Europe doesn't get into that at all, right? So there are some things which belong to the states and some things which belong to Europe, and this is over and above any kind of citizenship initiative or other debate that you might have at local or European level.
Thank you very much. Moving to economic sectors, regarding defense and spending on services, where do you see the way forward of Europe in regards to the geopolitical conflicts around us?
Europe was never established as a military project. There are other areas where member states can collaborate when it comes to military cooperation, but ultimately Europe was born out of war. And Europe was born out of, instead of competing of which country has the biggest army, the biggest navy, ultimately we have economic collaboration based on fundamental freedoms for our citizens. And I don't believe that we should, in this day and age, when we really need to invest and bolster our social investments in our citizens, we cannot spare a cent and put it in military collaboration or a European army. I am totally against that idea. Again, I believe it is and must continue to be national competence, and to be totally frank, I don't have trust in the way that decisions are being taken at European level when it comes to our foreign policy. We have seen huge divergences from how we acted, and we acted correctly when we condemned the war of aggression against Ukraine. There I am in full agreement, but we were toothless in front of a genocide happening in Gaza, for example. If you compare the action that Europe took in the face of the aggression of Russia on Ukraine and in the face of the genocide that is being unleashed and has been unleashed for the past months by the Israeli government against the Palestinians, the difference is rampant. I haven't heard one single sanction being imposed by the European Union on Israel. I haven't heard, or the opposite. I have seen delegations, Israeli delegations made up of ministers who are pushing forward this genocide, who are still being given red carpet treatment in Parliament. So there I am, as a Maltese, as someone who is a firm believer in our neutrality provisions in our constitution, but apart from my ideology, I still don't believe that we can trust. For example, we have a lot of discussions on giving away unanimity in council when it comes to taking these kind of decisions I am totally against. Why? Not because I don't believe in the European project, in the advancement of the European project. Not that I don't believe that Europe should be a stronger voice, but I don't believe that we are taking the right decisions when compared to how we faced the situation in Ukraine and not what we have done, what we haven't done in the face of a genocide against the Palestinians.
When it comes to defense, I want to make 2 points. First one, maybe more generic. I think it is quite unfortunate that in Malta, given our strong polarization between Labour, PN, and other parties, we cannot come to terms with saying, at least on one topic, there is a fundamental agreement on the values which unite us, which is neutrality. Why can't we? Why does this have to be a politicized topic? For instance, when we saw the European elections, the campaign, we had accusations of people saying this guy wants to send us to war, this other guy. No. I mean, what Alex has said, I can share 90% of what he said. And in Parliament, although we vote, he might vote against, I might abstain on some areas. Essentially, we agree. Malta is a neutral state and should remain a neutral state. So, we should, at least in one area where we agree, we should be aware, right? Between the political parties. Then there are nuances. There are nuances, yes. For instance, I believe that is a mistake, a great mistake, that Malta does not participate in permanent structured cooperation on defense. This is not participating in dealing with arms, or buying arms, or sending arms and weapons to Ukraine. No, this is different. This is a specific project that the European Union has launched way back in 2012, and where Malta has always decided to stay out of. And what is this? It's called PESCO, Permanent Structured Cooperation. These are projects where different military entities of different member states and defense entities cooperate on specific projects. Let's say, cyber security, right? Wouldn't it be great if the Maltese military forces participate in training on cyber security and learn from the French, from the Spanish, from the Italians? This is PESCO. I want the Maltese military forces to be equipped. I want them to be prepared. When the flotilla going to Palestine was attacked, what did you feel about this? I mean, didn't we feel powerless in this? Didn't you all feel powerless? We don't even have the resources to know exactly what happened and why and how we could intervene. So, wouldn't it be good if we, use Europe better to equip ourselves? Now, this is PESCO. This is not Europe for Peace Facility or the 800 billion investment in arms. No, this is different. This is collaborating in Europe, respecting our neutrality, which Denmark does, which Cyprus does, which Austria does, and Denmark is now in NATO. But Austria is a neutral state, they are in PESCO, okay? Ireland is a neutral state, they are in PESCO. So, we should have a more mature discussion, a more serious discussion, which also sees opportunities of European collaboration in this area. Now, when it comes to military spending, I don't agree with military spending. I don't agree with forcing Malta into 2%, 3% GDP spent on military. No, we are not in NATO. That is a NATO obligation. And what we need to do in the European Parliament, in the European, non-European structures, is to put our foot down. Listen, you need to respect neutral member states. Okay, this is what I'm trying to do in EPP. It's not easy because, you know, this thing is on the agenda every single week. But this is something which we should be clear on in Malta and work together to achieve our deliverables. Thank you.
Moving on to the next question. First of all, thanks a lot. The final one. So moving on to the final question, we're returning a bit to the local sector in connection to the EU. Do you believe that Malta has successfully used EU funding and opportunities, and what is there more to achieve as a nation from these EU programs?
I think that we have fared really well when it comes to the absorption of EU funds and the projects that ultimately were undertaken from infrastructure, from agricultural, from educational, from social. We have an endless list of projects that were co-financed or financed by the European Union. I always say that the biggest challenge when it comes to funding, when it comes to these projects is one. It is the issue of visibility. Visibility that these particular projects are European Union funded or co-funded. And I think it's really important to continue to promote, because this is one of the best aspects of the European Union. And it's really important, especially when it comes to the discussion that we are having right now on the next MFF, to really continue to promote cohesion funds. Cohesion funds which should continue to be used, especially in cases of islands who are facing insulation or double insulation, such as Gozo. And I think that, and this is one of the points that we are pushing forward also as a delegation, as a Labour delegation in the European Parliament, that we should not confuse between cohesion funds and the funds which are directed more for enlargement, and funds which are being used directly or proposed to be used directly for accession countries such as Ukraine. I think cohesion funds should continue to be focused on the challenges, on leveling up our infrastructure, our resources, our competitiveness, especially for those member states who are facing particular difficulties such as Malta due to our insularity. But I think that overall we are faring really well when it comes to absorbing EU funds, when it comes to using EU funds. And you can look all around you, even here on campus, and you will see a lot of projects which have been funded directly or co-funded by the European Union.
First of all, I want to compliment and to thank the thousands of people which work in this area, because believe me, applying EU funding and actually getting it to Malta and applying it to projects takes a lot of work. So big thanks goes to a lot of people working in government ministries, in private entities, in consultancies, who are doing a very good job of attracting funding and actually spending it. Okay? That's the first thing. Secondly, I agree with Alex that we have done very well, but I am much more ambitious than that. I want more for Malta. There are areas where obviously we need to invest and we have not. Gozo is one of them. I'm seeing GUG here from Gozo. Okay? Our connectivity with Gozo, why should we be having still, a 35-year-old ship where we can go get a new ship funded by the EU money? Okay? That's an obvious one, okay? We shouldn't be wasting time not applying for funds where they are available, so we can do more. We've been doing well, it's true, but we can do much more. We can spend much more money on youth programs. I want to double the amount of Erasmus. I want to double the amount of Discovery EU. I want to double the amount of Solidarity Corps, and we must use our island state as an argument with the European Union. We can do this. I want more when it comes to accessibility of funding. This counts especially for the agricultural field, you know. At the end of the day, all of us, and even at lunch, we need to eat, right? Don't you want to have food security, that you have, you know, that Maltese farmers can produce enough food to sustain us? They are not. We are basically importing 80% of our food from abroad. We should produce more food. And to do that, we need more accessible funding for our farmers. For that, we also need to insist on having funds which invest in our infrastructure. To give you an example, okay? We produce mushrooms in Malta. Do you know that we need to import the soil where mushrooms grow? Isn't that ridiculous? We should produce our own soil for the mushrooms. We should invest in infrastructure to help our farmers and in many other areas. The last point, transparency. The first report by European Public Prosecutor's Office says that there are 14 pending cases of fraud from EU money, from EU funds. This is not good. Notwithstanding the best efforts that I know that government ministries and departments do, they do a lot of effort, okay? But we have 14 cases of fraud. So this is an alarm bell, okay? We need to secure good governance also when it comes to the spending of EU money. And the last point is that we need to be ambitious enough to be able to change EU laws when they are not good enough for us when it comes to funding. So in the next weeks, months, we'll be discussing the next programming period, the MFF that Alex mentioned, and this will be an opportunity in the areas where we see that EU funding is not working well enough for Malta to adapt it to our needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your time on your busy schedules. Thank you.
Thank you.